Welcome to the Love Deep Lab podcast, helping you integrate sex, sexiness, sacredness, and science in your life and your bedroom. And now, your host, Dr. Stormy.
Hi, I'm your host, Dr. Stormy. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Today's episode is all about communication, challenges with it, and 7 strategies for better communication in all your relationships, your love partnership, and your work relationships, your parenting relationships, just all of your relationships. And I wanted to come to you today. I'm really excited about this episode because as a therapist who has worked in mental health for the last 14 years, personally, in my own past relationships, professionally with my clients, and also the research shows that the number one reason for divorce or dissatisfaction in relationships is poor communication and lack of communication. And communication is a practice. It's something we can get better at. It's something we can commit to. It's something we can look at. How are we doing? Where do we rock it? Where could we be better at it? And it's just really exciting to me to share these tips with you and have you start to practice them for better communication. Because when we have poor communication or a lack of communication in our partnership, so this is like our love partnership, and also our other relationships, it erodes the trust and integrity. It can also be really harmful and hurtful, the result of poor communication or lack of communication. So I'm super excited about these practical tips for you today, and I can't wait to dive in. So I say that a lot, but this episode really is for everyone because we are all human beings and we are all really connected, and we have such a deep need for belonging and for love and connection. Some would say it's our deepest need, because communication is one way that we foster deep connection. And why you care about this, why everyone cares about this. And so this is for those of you listening that are in love partnerships, and also those of you that are out there single. Maybe you're dating, maybe you're just consciously celibate, but communication will help draw in a different kind of partner if you communicate well from the beginning. So this really is for everyone out there listening. And why we're excited, why it's so important is as we begin this practice of better communication and deeper communication, more authentic communication, we have increased trust in our relationships. We have less conflict and more conflict resolution, quicker conflict resolution. So less conflict and quicker to resolve the conflict. And of course, part I'm so excited about is better intimacy, because we have to feel safe and we have to have trust to have fabulous sex and fabulous intimacy. So this is also a tool to help you in the bedroom. And make no mistake about it, communication is absolutely an indicator for marital satisfaction, relationship satisfaction. So as you practice better communication, you will have more satisfaction in your relationship. Like I mentioned earlier, it's also the leading cause for divorce. 65% of couples divorcing say that communication, poor communication or the lack of, was the reason for the divorce. It's also the number one reason why couples split, even non-married couples. And the research shows that 70% of men in this one study reported that the problem with communication was nagging or criticism from their woman. And for women, the 70% of women reported that they don't feel validated or heard, their emotions don't feel held by their man. And so these tips today will really help address either, both of those challenges. So when we have better communication, we don't come across as nagging or critical. And when we have better communication, we are better able to hold and be curious about our partner's emotions. So this is really exciting in that area as well. And John Gottman, who I just absolutely love, out of the University of Washington. He's a researcher who's just studied, I don't even know at this point how many couples, but he can, like, with crazy accuracy predict whether couples will be together in like 5 years and 10 years. And he talks about 4 communication problems that are really detrimental to relationships. So number 1 is criticism of our partner. And who out there listening has been responsible for that? I know I have in my past. And I work really hard about not being critical and coming across critical. So criticism of our partner, contempt for our partner, defensiveness when hearing communications from our partner, and the 4th one is stonewalling, which is no communication at all. So those are indicators that the marriage or the relationship is struggling. That those are, the hope in this message is that you can work on these things, you can practice these things. So check yourself. Which of those 4, maybe all of them, are you currently experiencing in your partnership or your relationship that you're looking at today? And which of them have you in your past? No judgment, because we have to be critical. We have to be curious about where we struggle to know where we can grow. So I just honor you for just taking a moment and checking in. Where do you practice those in your partnership, and how can you improve? So 4 common mistakes of communication before we get into the tips would be daydreaming when your partner's talking to you. So maybe you're kind of like on your phone or thinking about your grocery list or thinking about anything else, but not being fully present with your partner. That is communication error number 1. The number 2 error is to thinking about what to say next. And this is a human nature. We train and practice ourselves not to do that with one of the strategies that we'll talk about in a minute called active listening. But not thinking about what to say next. Again, back to presence, being fully present with your partner when they're coming to you with a communication. And the third communication error is judging your partner's communication, maybe their expression of it, maybe what you read as their emotions behind it, but being in judgment as your partner is coming to you to communicate. And then the fourth mistake or error is listening with a goal in mind. So I'm listening to change you, or I'm listening to change your mind. That is probably not going to ever go well in your partnership. So we want to avoid these 4 mistakes by practicing these 7 tips. So the number 1 communication tip for today that we're going to share is asking open-ended questions. This is kind of communication 101. It may sound so basic because it is, but asking open-ended questions. So let's say your partner shows up late for a date or something, and you internalize that as they don't care about it. All the things that we do, because one of the major problems is that we assume, right? So we assume that we understand what our partner's intentions or emotions or why they did something that they did. So making no assumptions. So asking open-ended questions helps us work with our assumptions. So instead of saying, you're always late, or I don't feel, or I'm upset because you're late, you say, I'm curious as to why you're late, or why you didn't show up today at the time we arranged, right? So that you hear the difference and it allows that person on the receiving end of the communication to avoid or hopefully work with getting into defensiveness. And defensiveness is wired. It's wired neurologically, biologically, instinctually. So we work on practicing non-defensiveness, and open-ended questions is a great way to start that. So that's a super easy one. The number 2 tip is watching nonverbal cues, right? So communication is verbal and nonverbal. And so watching your partner, watching the person in communication with you for their nonverbal cues, it will help you tap into compassion as the receiver of the communication. It will also help you know whether to touch or reach out or extend or hug or give space. So really looking for and paying attention to the nonverbal cues is the number 2 tip. The number 3 tip, and I already touched on it, is don't try to read their mind. Don't assume anything. Another way of thinking about it, I forget who says it, but it's assume benign intention, right? So it's the example of the person showing up late. Don't assume that they don't care about the date, or they were busy or doing something else. Just assume benign intention. Don't make any assumptions at all. And don't assume to understand or be able to read your partner's mind. This will allow you, as the receiver of the communication, again, to practice non-defensiveness. The number 4th way is that it's a two-way street. Communication is a two-way street. We often find ourselves communicating to get our point across, or to change the person's mind, or to hold our stance, or dig our feet in, or state our position. But really, communication is always a two-way street. So you are the receiver of communication, and you are offering communication. And so really remembering that's a two-way street, particularly as if the communication feels tense or heated, or has some energy behind it, listening for your partner's response, giving them time, being comfortable with the silence. We are so uncomfortable with silence. So practicing, it doesn't always have to be in words. And the 5th tip that I love actually comes from Dr. Emily Morse, who has a great podcast called Sex with Emily. And she talks about, and I love it, so timing, tone, and turf. So what we say, when we say it, and how we say it matters so much. So to coin Dr. Emily Morse, timing, tone, and turf. So think about your timing. Is there a better time to communicate with your partner? Think about the tone, right? The tone, we could say something and have our partner handle it beautifully. We change our tone and our partner goes off the rails. So timing, tone, and then turf. Where are you when you're communicating it? Is there a place that feels more neutral, more aligned? Maybe you feel more connected. That's a better place to bring a communication. So that's the 5th one, timing, tone, and turf. The 6th tip is nonviolent communication. I love nonviolent communication. If you aren't familiar with it, Google it. There's so many books and articles and everything on it, but it's Marshall B. Rosenberg's concept of nonviolent communication, and it's amazing. So I'm going to kind of just break it down really briefly for you, but there's so much out there, and it's phenomenal in any relationship, love partnerships, work partnerships, parenting. So nonviolent communication. But basically his tenets are observation does not equal interpretation, right? So back to the kind of the assuming we know what our partner is doing or thinking or why they're doing something. So observation does not equal interpretation. Feelings do not equal thoughts. So if I'm thinking these things and I'm not communicating them in words to my partner, I can't expect my partner to meet me, to hold me, to understand me. So really being thoughtful on communicating your feelings and sticking with feelings, because feelings can't be wrong. They are never wrong. They might not be the end all be all. They kind of wax and wane like the weather. But that's a podcast for another time. But communicating your feelings. This is how I'm feeling. When that happens, I feel this, right? Sticking with the I language and sticking with feeling. And another tenet of nonviolent communication is needs do not equal strategy. So my need does not necessarily turn into a strategy, right? So again, that kind of wanting your partner to do something to change them, okay? And then the request does not equal demand. So I need to be really clear in my request of my partner and not be in demand of my partner, because they're an autonomous person with free will, but I am a person also with free will and feelings. So communicating my request really clearly. So nonviolent communication is amazing. I highly recommend that you check it out. And then the 7th tip is probably like, if I have to pick one for you to practice this week, this is going to be your sexy homework, is full body listening, also called active listening. So often, like I mentioned several times already, we are listening and we're in defensiveness and we're thinking about a rebuttal or a reply or yeah, but, or you always. So really full body active listening. And I'm going to go into a little bit more what that means. But I love this quote by M. Scott Peck. You cannot truly listen to anyone and do anything else at the same time. You cannot truly listen to anyone and do anything else at the same time, by M. Scott Peck. So that to me represents this full body listening. So how we do that is we practice presence. Again, that kind of another tip of not being distracted when our partner's coming to us with communication. And then also the nonverbals, leaning in rather than leaning away. So our body language, our breathing, slowing our breathing down, and really listening for what's behind and underneath the words. So this is a way we're listening with our ears and our heart and our sex and our whole body. So full body or active listening is incredible. And it also means that you check in. You might gently interrupt your partner and say, ask for clarification. Did I understand that right? Did I hear you right? And you try to repeat back as closely as exactly the words that they used. Because one of the problems in communication is we don't feel heard, or we don't feel like our partner's hearing us, or they're tweaking it through their own ego and lens, because we always are. So really asking clarifying questions, asking if you understood correctly, asking them to restate or re-say it if you missed it. And these are just some strategies to practice. And you can also Google active listening or full body listening, but it is an incredible tool. And I promise you, it will change your communication and how you communicate with your partner. So these are just some tips. So your sexy homework is to pick 2 of these 7. And then I'm going to ask you to also practice full body and active listening. So 3. So pick 2 others and give them a try in your next communication with your partner, with your children, with a friend, with a colleague, with a boss. Practice these and see how it changes. See how it changes the depth of communication, the ease of communication. Because what we are going for is being authentically seen and authentically heard. And to do that takes courage and vulnerability. So I just honor you for practicing these strategies. And I can't wait to hear how they go for you. Please feel free to email me or DM me. I would love to hear which ones worked, which ones sucked for you, all of it above. Because again, like everything, we are welcoming you to a practice. And we can absolutely improve and practice the skill and art of communication. So just to close, I'm going to read a quote by Ray T. Bennett that I love on communication. So listen with curiosity, speak with honesty, act with integrity. The greatest problem with communication is we don't listen to understand. We listen to reply. When we listen with curiosity, we don't listen with the intent to reply. We listen for what's behind the words. That's by Ray T. Bennett. So thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in today. And thank you for being brave and opening your hearts to love